Chapter 4, Figuring It Out. The first thing I did was pick a date that I would start my new way of eating. I landed on March 5th, 2016, a Saturday. The next thing to figure out was what kind of plan I was going to follow. Was it going to be low calorie, low fat, low something else? Did I need to once again join Weight Watchers? How about Nutrisystem? I didn't know where to start, but then I remembered how about 15 years earlier, a coworker and I had gone on a diet that came from a book called Protein Power. It promoted a high-protein, low-carb diet, which actually worked for a while. I started at about 250 pounds or so and got within shouting distance of 200. But as with so many other diets, once I stopped eating that way, the pounds came back on. It might not have been a perfect plan, but at least I had a place to start. Around this time, I was hearing a lot about the keto diet. I didn't know what it was, so I investigated. I discovered that the main difference between a keto diet and a low-carb diet is the ratio of macronutrients, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, you consume. On a low-carb diet, a person typically eats 50 to 150 grams of carbs per day. But on a keto diet, your daily carb count is fewer than 50 net grams, usually closer to 20 net carbs per day. Another main difference is how much protein you consume. On a standard low-carb diet, protein intake is pretty high, but on a keto diet, protein intake is around 20% of total calories. Fat intake tends to be higher on a keto diet because the fats are replacing the carbs and proteins. I suppose before I go further, I should explain what I mean by net carbs, as they are a major concept in the keto diet. Net carbs are the carbs left over after you subtract grams of dietary fiber from the total carb count in a particular food. You do this because, in a way, fiber cancels out the fast-acting energy of glucose. Fiber is unique in the way your body handles it. Unlike starch and sugar, naturally occurring fiber isn't absorbed into your small intestine, and therefore it takes longer to digest. Now, there are different kinds of fiber, but for our purposes we will consider all fiber in calculating net carbs. Just check the nutrition label on your food to determine how many grams of dietary fiber can be subtracted from the total carbohydrate count to determine your net carb value. For whole foods and other foods that don't have a label, you can easily search the internet for nutrition values. I do that all the time. After learning the basics like what a net carb was, I still had questions. Why is it called a keto diet, for one thing? I learned that keto is based on a metabolic state known as ketosis, which means there is a high concentrate of ketones, a fat-based fuel source, in your bloodstream. While glucose, or blood sugar, is the preferred source of fuel for many cells in the body, and foods that have a high amount of carbohydrates are loaded with glucose. If you limit the amount of glucose you consume, your body will then turn to the fat you have stored for fuel. When you limit carbs to the point that your body turns to your fat stores, then ketosis occurs. For ketosis to start, most people need to eat fewer than 50 grams of carbs per day, and sometimes as little as 20 grams of carbs per day. However, the exact carb count depends on the individual. Some people confuse ketosis with a condition called ketoacidosis. And while ketosis can be part of a normal metabolism, ketoacidosis is a dangerous condition most often seen in patients with type 1 diabetes that can be fatal if left untreated. With that said, there are widely varying opinions on the benefits versus the harm that can be done by ketosis. I suggest you talk to your physician before starting any program that may put you in a state of ketosis. Also, if you decide to begin a program that puts you in ketosis, be mindful that there are varying degrees of this metabolic state. I found that an effective way to monitor my ketosis was to purchase keto strips at my local pharmacy. Once you urinate on one of these small plastic strips, the end of the strip will change colors. And by comparing the color of your strip to the color chart on the container, you can tell what level of ketosis you are in. The darker the color, the more ketones are in your bloodstream. I kept mine in the moderate to small category by adjusting my carb intake. My next step was to determine the amount of carbs I wanted to consume every day. In the past, I had tried to go as low as 20 net carbs per day, but I felt like I was starving. So after doing some research and reading stories from others who had embraced a low-carb lifestyle, I found that many people who had a lot of weight to lose, like I did, found that they could lose weight and remain fairly hunger-free by consuming 50 net carbs per day. It was enough to make them feel full, but low enough to begin a mild ketosis that would result in weight loss. So, that was my plan. 50 net carbs per day.